Here we go. All right, so good afternoon. As I said, my name is Jessica, and like I said, you might recognize me as you might have had me as your trainer for the July 1st and July 2nd training. I'm from D2L, so I work for D2L, the company that makes the platform Brightspace, or as you might know it, iLearnNYC. And so anything that you need to know about how to use the platform itself, how to build discussion forums, how to move your content around, how to release things to specific sets of students, which is what we're actually going to be covering today. Those types of questions are the questions that I can help you out with today. I see, like I said, we've got a couple people from iLearn who might be able to answer some iLearn or NYC specific questions. So if you do have questions that pertain to specifically to NYC, it might be difficult for me to answer those questions, but we might still be able to get you to the answer because like I said, we do have a couple people here from iLearn NYC who have joined us. Perfect. And so I just noticed Winnie's joined as well, so I'm gonna promote her to a panelist. There we go. All right, so the session today is an hour long and we're about 6 minutes into it or so. And so the first 20 minutes is going to be a demonstration of what I said we're going to be demonstrating today, which was how to set up groups and release content or assessments to those groups. And so we picked this topic really based on the most common questions that we're getting to our support line. So you might have already called into our support line and talked to some of our agents to get your questions answered. And some of the most popular questions we had were around this very workflow, creating groups and then releasing things, whether that thing is some content or an assignment to specific groups of students. And so I did show this in the training on July 1st and 2nd, but there was a lot in that training as well. So we're going to take a little bit more time today to do it a little bit slower. Now that you've been in the platform potentially for a little I guess about 2 weeks now-ish, maybe now you're ready to take on this this workflow. So I'm going to do 20 minutes of that. Like I said, I'll monitor the Q&A as I go today and answer any questions live that pertain to what I'm actually showing. And then we'll just kind of have open 40-minute Q&A. So if you do have questions, I wasn't sure how many questions we're going to be getting, but if there's a lot, then we'll definitely prioritize answering those questions that pertain to the subject matter of today, which is creating groups and releasing content or assessments to those groups. But if there's time, we'll definitely hit up some of the other questions as well. All right. So, like I said, today's going to be a demonstration of how to differentiate your content using groups. And so really there's kind of two main things you have to know that you need to do to be able to do this. You need to create the groups in your course. And so you can be creating groups based on levels, or maybe you have a couple students in your class who are on an IEP and they need to be in a group together because they're going to get different projects than the rest of the group. Or perhaps you want to create, say 3 groups in your class to divide them out or kind of sort them, for lack of a better term, into different leveled groups. And so you can create multiple sets of groups, whether it's for, one set for your levels, one set for your ELL learners, and so on. So you can create those different group categories, is what they're called. And then the next step is to release something to the students based on that group using what's called a release condition. And when I say release that something could be some additional supplementary materials that you put in the content tool of your course, or an additional assignment that you've created just for some specific groups of students in the assignments tool or in the quiz tool. There's actually release conditions, or the ability to put conditions on releasing things all throughout the environment. So it's not just content that you can release or assignments that you can release based on these groupings, but you can release announcements. If you just want to send a message out to specific groups of students, you could put a release condition on announcements as well. So this is really helpful for many, many reasons, but the reason I'm going to focus on today is for the purpose of differentiating your content so that not all students are seeing the same thing in your course. Maybe you're working with the Edmentum content or the Scholastic Lit Camp content. Whatever it is, you might want to be adding your own supplementary materials and releasing those to specific groups of students. So that's my goal here today, is to show you how you would do that. So as I said, 2 big steps. The first one is to create the groups, and that's what we're going to do first. So I'm in the iLearnNYC platform here. I'm logged in, you can see, as Tammy Teacher. So I'm a teacher, and I'm going to hop into a course. And so I'm going to go just into the Summer in the City 2020 Sandbox course. And now, as you're probably familiar with, when you come into a course, you're sitting at the home page of the course. And so just to take you a little tour of what's going on in my course, I just want to make you aware of what I've got in here so far. So I've got a couple of announcements, some that are automatically being posted. Those virtual field trips are automatically being posted. I'm using the activity feed to post some messages to my students, but I could be using the announcements tool as well. If I go up to my content tool, I've got a couple of units or folders sitting here. Scholastic Lit Camp, a couple others. Some are visible, or these first 4 are visible to students. You can see this one's got an eye with a line through it, so it's not visible to students. And I've created a unit here with some supplemental activities. And so you see one of them's a Google Doc that I've added to my content tool. One of them's a Word document that I've just uploaded. One of them's an additional assignment that I created. One of them's an additional quiz that I created. So these are all examples of things that I could be creating to release to specific groups of students. However, right now, these are visible to everyone. So like I said, we're going to take a little trip over to the groups tool and set up some groups so that I can release these supplemental activities to those specific groups. Now, to get to the groups tool, you probably are already aware that your navigation bar at the top, this helps you navigate in and around the course, right? It's a 2-liner, so we've got this little arrow here that pops down to the second line if your nav bar has that many icons. And you can see that I don't see the groups tool on my nav bar. It's not in my toolkit, and that's okay. If there's ever a tool that you need access to that's not in your kind of like your quick access panel, then you can actually go to the list of all the tools available in your course by clicking on Course Admin. And so that will show you how to, that will give you a list of all the tools in your classroom or in your virtual space that you have access to. So I'll click on Course Admin. And now I've got a list of all the tools. Some of them already are on the nav bar, but some of them aren't, and namely that groups tool that I was talking about. So see right here, here's how we get to the groups tool. I'm going to click on that. And when I first come here, it's pretty empty because I haven't set up any groups yet. And so I'm going to go ahead and create my first set of groups. And the first set that I want to create, because I want to show you a couple different examples, is I'm going to say leveled groups. So let's say I'm a teacher and I want to divide my class into 3 different groups, kind of like a level 1 group who might kind of struggle, they need some extra support, a level 2 group that are kind of working right at grade level, they're okay to plug along in that middle group, and then a level 3 group who might be more my advanced learners that I want to be releasing supplementary material to them to challenge them a little bit more. So for this example, I want to create 3 different groups and divide my class into those 3 groups. And so I'm going to call these leveled groups. So just give it a name, because like I said, I can have multiple sets of groups. And so this set of groups are my leveled groups. You can give it a description and everything, but no need for my example here. I'm really just going to keep this simple. The only other important field is the enrollment type. And the default is the one I actually want, number of groups. So I mentioned that I said I want 3 groups. So that's the number of groups that I want. And so that's the enrollment type that I'm looking for. I know that I want 3 groups, so it's number of groups. Number of groups, you can see actually has 2 options. There's number of groups, and then there's number of groups, no auto enrollments. So if I selected number of groups, that would automatically divide the whole class into 3 different groups randomly. But I don't want that, right? I want to say, nope, my level 1s go in this group, my level 2s go in this group, my level 3s go into this group. So I'm looking for the option, number of groups, no auto enrollments. And that's going to be the most common one that you're going to use for the example that I'm talking about today, the idea of creating differentiated groups, grouping students based on level, interest, familiarity and need around English language learners, that sort of thing. You're probably most of the time going to use this number of groups. You can see there's lots of other options, things like self-enrollment, where students can sign up to be a part of groups, and kind of other types of grouping that you can use. But like I said, for today's example and what we're talking about today, differentiating your content, number of groups is going to be the one, with no auto enrollments is going to be the one that you're going to want. And so like I said, I know I want to divide my class into 3 different groups. And that's really the most important fields here. There's a couple of other additional advanced options, but we're not going to get into those. We're going to keep it really simple and just talk about those 3 places that you need to fill out to create your group. So your category name, choosing your enrollment type, and then how many groups you want. And so I'll hit save. And now what will happen is I've got my leveled groups, and group 1, group 2, group 3. And you can see there's no students in any of these groups because I said no auto enrollments. Don't automatically enroll students in these groups. I want to select who's in what group. So now my next step is to do that. So I would go into group 1. And right here, there's enroll users. And so you can see there's additional options like adding a description that you might use for other examples. But in this example, we're going to go right to enrolling the users. We won't use those. And so when you do that, when you we're enrolling them in group 1. And now here's a list of all the students in my class. I've got a big class full of demo students. And then it's just up to the teacher. I can go ahead and check off the students who fall into this level 1. And again, this is me thinking about who are the students that I want to put in a group together so that when I add some content or have an additional assignment, I can say, give this assignment or give this content to group 1 of my leveled groups. So I'll hit save. And you can see there we go. I've added 6 members to my group 1. And so then I could go through and now do the same thing for group 2. Maybe they'll, for some reason, there's some additional materials that I know I'm going to want to be sending directly to group 2, and go ahead and enroll those users or those students. I'll just check off a bunch randomly. And so I can go ahead and do that and do that for the entire class. And now I've got my leveled groups, and I'm just going to quickly do it for group 3 just so that just so we see some numbers in each one. I don't obviously remember which ones I checked off. When you're doing this in real life, you would know who you're adding to each group. I'm just kind of randomly clicking on things, which means I might have some students who are in the same group twice. You probably wouldn't want that in real life for this example anyway. But there we go. All right, so I've got 3 groups here, each with a couple of students in each one. And so now that I've done that, now I can go and release that content or that assignment or that quiz or that discussion or that announcement to these specific groups. So that's our step 1, right? That's the step 1 of building the groups. But before we go over to that step 2, the idea of putting that release condition on the content or the assignment or whatever it is, I would just want to show you 2 other examples of how you might set up groups. Because in this example is kind of like, I want to take my whole class and divide them into 3 groups. But you might have a circumstance where it's more like, no, I don't want to group the entire class. I just want one group that's for my English language learners, and I want them in a group together so that I can add some supplementary content to the content tool for my English language learners and very easily release that content just to them. And so I want to show you how to do that, right? You don't have to set up a group so that every member of the class is a part of a specific group. So I'm going to set up another category. I'm going to go new category. And I want to create a special category of groups. In this case, it's going to be of a group. It's just going to be one category for one particular group. And I'm going to call this ELL. And then again, I want a number of groups. I just want one. I just want to take a couple of students and put them into one group. And so I'll hit save. And so now it's created one group within that new category for those ELL students. So I'll go into group 1 and just do the same thing that I did. Enroll those users. And then check off, let's say I've got a couple of my ELL learners. Say these 4 students are ELL learners. And so now they're a part of that group. And so again, now I've got 2 kind of categories sitting in my, or 2 examples sitting in my course. I've got my leveled groups that I've divided the entire class into 3 different groups, or I've got my ELL groups or my ELL group where I just grabbed 4 students and put them in a group here. I want to show you, actually I'll go over to the content tool now and show you, now that we've created these groups, how do you go about releasing content or specifying, now only show this content or only show this assignment to a specific group. And so I'm going to jump over to content. And so what I showed you at the beginning there, those supplemental activities, right now those are visible to everyone, but I don't want everyone to see these items. I only want specific groups to see them. So I can either put a release condition on the entire unit and say this entire folder called supplemental activities, release it to the specific group. Or I can go on the individual items within the folder and put release conditions on those individually. And so I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to go on the individual item, so this YKale Google Doc, and I'm going to put a release condition on it. So I select it. That's checked off, or it's selected. And then on the 3 dots here, you can see there's view release conditions. So this is your key place here, view release conditions. Check that off. And now you go to create your release condition. And there's actually, the release condition we're talking about today is releasing content based on group enrollment, based on a group that they're enrolled in. But there's actually a ton of other release condition types, but we're not going to talk about all of those today. But you can see, right, there's lots you could really build on with release conditions. But for the purpose of today's, we're just talking about releasing content based on groups. And so to find that release condition, it's under the class list section, and then there's group enrollment. And so the condition type is based on group enrollment, so that looks good. And then the details, so it's going to say, okay, so what group do you want to release this YKale document to? And so you select your group. And so when you select your group, what do you see here? All those groups that we just created. So there's that category of ELL learners, which we just have one group with those 4 students in the group, or the leveled groups where I created 3 different groups, each with a couple of students in each one. And so let's pretend that this document is a supplementary material for my ELL learners. So I want to release it to them. So I select group 1 and I say create. And so now this activity is only visible to those who satisfy its condition. What's the condition? They have to be a member of the group ELL group 1. So we hit save. And now you can see we've got this little indicator here that it's visible to students, but only if the conditions are met. And what are the conditions? Being a member of that ELL group 1. Okay. So now that you can see I've got this little symbol here, I've added that condition onto this piece of content, but I also, as I mentioned, I have an assignment sitting here, a supplemental assignment that's sitting in the assignments tool. I could do the same thing in the assignments tool. So if I go to this assignment, and edit that assignment. So when I'm creating the assignment, or if I want to make a change to the assignment so it's only visible to specific people, then when I'm creating this assignment, you'll see that there's an option in the assignment creation experience under restrictions where I can add a release condition here as well. Now, keep a little tip, if you're using these a lot, use the attach existing. So if you've already created the release condition, it'll be sitting under the attach existing. So you see there, attach existing. I don't need to go through all those clicks of going to group enrollment, selecting the group, and now I can really quickly release it to this ELL group 1. But just for the sake of example, let's create a new one and release this to, my group 2 of my leveled groups. So I'll go to create and attach, and just do the same thing that we did with content. It's the same thing, except in this case, I'm releasing this assignment only to a specific group of students. So I click on the condition type, I find class list, group enrollment, and select my group. And so I said I want to give it to group 2 of my leveled groups. Create. And so now they have to be a member of that group. Now, if we do want to get fancy, if that's not enough for you, you want a little bit more, I will mention that you can have multiple release conditions. So if this applies to group 2 and group 3, you can say create and attach and do that same thing and add it for group 3. Group enrollment, group 3, create. And so now you've got 2 release conditions on there. So just a additional option if you do have some examples where, oh, actually I want this to go to a couple different groups. You can do that as well. So I'll hit save and close. And what you'll notice is in the assignments tool, I've got this little symbol here on it now. And that means that there's release conditions on this assignment. It's not visible to everyone. Now, the last thing I want to show you before we get into any open Q&A is around creating individualized groups. So it's a bit of a misnomer because when you think of a group, you think of many people within a group, but it's actually possible with the groups tool to create a separate group for every individual student in your class. And what that will allow you to do is, what if there's just, one assignment where you're like, I just want this to go to that one specific student, right? But maybe they're a part of group 1 that has, 4 other students in it. So what you can do is go to the groups tool and set up an individual group for every student in the class, which sounds like a lot of work, but it's not, because it's only a couple clicks to automatically do it for you. So I'm going to head back to the groups tool and show you how to do that, because it's a handy thing to know. Again, if you have a lot of those examples where it's like, I only want it to go to this student, or I only want it to go to this student. So I'll go back to course admin and find my way back to the groups tool. Course admin, and then groups right here. So back to where we were. And we've got those ELL groups. I've got the leveled group still sitting there, but I want to create a new category, a third example. And so here, I'm going to call this individual groups. And here under enrollment type, when I first showed you this, I said that the most common one you'll use is number of groups, no auto enrollments, but I want to just call out another one, and that's the last one on the list here, single user, member specific. And so if I click that, what that will do is that is going to create an individual group for every student in my class. So I'm not going to worry about these advanced additional properties. That's all I need to do is just give it a name and select the enrollment type. And so I hit save. And so now it kind of auto-magically creates an individual group for every student in my class. So you see I have 16 students in the class, and here they are each in their own individual group. And what that does is now when I head back to, let's go to the quiz tool this time. And let's say I want to just release a little quiz that I built just to a specific student. So let's say this check for understanding 2. I can go ahead and edit this one and add a release condition to it. Same deal, same release condition, but now we're going to see an even bigger list under our list of groups. So if I go over to the restrictions tab, just like we did in the assignments tool, and then go to release conditions. So remember, there's always that attach existing if you've used the condition before. So here's the ones we've used as a nice little shortcut, but we just created those individual groups, and so we haven't used those yet. So I'm going to click on create and attach. And condition type, and go down to that class list, that group enrollment again. And now what we have is, in addition to those ELL groups and those leveled groups, there are those individual groups. And so now I can select individual students to release this, in this example, quiz to. And so let's say I want this to go to student 16. So I hit create, and now student 16 is the only student in this class that sees this quiz. And like I showed you in the last example, if there were 2 or 3 students that you wanted to release this to, then you could add multiple release conditions, or multiple conditions. Whoops. Let me try that again. So I go back to class list, group enrollment, and select student 17 as well. And so if you're always releasing additional things to student 16 and 17, well, then it might just be faster to put them in a group together, and then I can always just say release to that group of those 2 students. Or if it's not going to be something that you're going to be using those 2 students together a lot, then keep them in individual groups, and just remember that you do always have the shortcut of attach existing. So student 16 and 17 will show up in that attach existing the next time that you go to use a release condition, if they're kind of your frequent students that you're releasing individual content to. So I've hit, or quizzes or assignments or whatever it is. So I've hit save there, and now you can see that release condition has popped up, that release condition symbol, meaning it's not visible to everyone. It's only visible to those who satisfy the condition, which in this case will be, of course, student 16 and student 17. All right. So that is everything I wanted to show you today. A little bit slower than what you would have gotten on the July 1st and July 2nd trainings, because we did have to go, there was a lot of material to cover on that day. So hopefully this being a little bit slower made it a little bit clearer for you. Before we open it up to questions, and by the way, if you do have questions, you can start popping them into that Q&A area. I just see one open one, which was around recording. And so I'll add the answer in there just so that you can all see that. And so yes, it is recorded and will be posted. Perfect. So if you have any other questions related to iLearn in general, or related specifically to everything I've shown you here today, please start putting them in the chat. And while you're doing that, I just want to go through a couple of places you can go to for support, which obviously this is one place that you can go to for support, which is the office hours that are being offered. We've got these going on next week as well, so feel free to pop back in for those. But there's also lots of self-serve options that you can go through. And so if I go back to the iLearnNYC homepage, the first thing I want to show you is the iLearnNYC training course. And so this is a course that's built specifically for teachers to kind of take them through step by step how to get started using iLearn. And so this is a great self-serve course that you can work at your own pace with to be introduced to the platform. The other thing I want to point out is the Get Help Here area. And so there's lots of links to different support pages as well, where you can watch our YouTube channel, watch our documentation or read our documentation, or go right to the support portal that's got some information there on various topics, as well as being able to chat with an expert at D2L around how to use the iLearnNYC platform. So those are some of the resources. I'm going to stop the recording now